Welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast, a podcast dedicated to exploring the applied philosophy of traditional Stoicism. The College of Stoic Philosophers is an online school founded in 2008. We at the college endeavor to educate all who would be Stoics and Stoic philosophers who aspire to the good life within the world community. Podcast episodes will include discussions of Stoic history, application, interviews, and much more, all while having some fun, fate permitting. I'm your host, Mark Sterry. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. From May 23rd to 25th, 2025, members of the College of Stoic Philosophers faculty met in Athens, Greece. We toured the Acropolis and Parthenon, saw where the original Stoa was, enjoyed each other's company over Greek food and drink, and talked life and philosophy. Each faculty member was asked to give a presentation of their choice to the group. I chose the role of emulating the music archivist Alan Lomax and solely focused on field documenting these presentations. Picture inside a bungalow Airbnb, a wooden table covered with bottles of Greek Coca-Cola, wine, Greek beer selections, and open bags of oregano potato chips, surrounded by 8 practicing traditional Stoics, now friends. Like Lomax recording early folk music, not all audio survived the trip due to equipment malfunction and the cosmos just not allowing it. What you're about to hear is an edited portion of a faculty presentation in this environment while on an adventure of a lifetime. Enjoy!
My name's Kevin Murphy. I think I joined the college in 2020, 2021. I became a faculty member in 2023. I'm from California. I'm a practicing attorney, and I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you at this special conference in this wonderful location. The title of my presentation is From Bar to Polis, which my focus will be on how legal ethics can enlighten and hopefully benefit each of our practice of Stoic philosophy. Really, I'm just trying to apply my ethical practice to and see what kind of benefit it will provide to you as my fellow colleagues in the conference, in the college. So really, it's an honor to be here in Athens, Greece. I founded Stoic Attorneys similar to the time period I joined the college initially. I'm a practicing attorney, as I told you. My mother is a practicing attorney. She's my law partner, and my stepdad is also an attorney. So when I think of lawyers, I see us as the Thomas Jeffersons of society, but I'm not naive. And I know that lawyers have a pretty bad reputation in America, and from what I can tell, internationally as well. And I think that's because there's a severe lacking of clear ethical adherence. And, the issue is, well, let me go through it. So I founded Stoic Attorneys. That organization was designed to basically cultivate a community of legal professionals who are committed to excellence in character, resilience, and the service that we provide, guided by the 4 Stoic virtues. So, wisdom, clear judgment, our legal knowledge, and employing an ethical analysis. Courage is, in part, handling difficult clients, speaking the truth, and facing professional uncertainty by doing the right thing, oftentimes. Justice is in fair representation, employing my professional ethics, and, a community responsibility to society as a whole. And temperance, I focus on a work-life balance, personal emotional regulation, and humility, right? Staying humble and doing the jobs that we're tasked to do. So I think that there is shared ethical ground for both philosophers who are teaching other people, our chosen Stoic path, and what I'm doing with the attorney stuff. And so that's why my goal is to explore how those my attorney ethical duties can reflect and reinforce each of your Stoic practice and philosophical integrity, hopefully. The title of my article is that non-virtuous lawyering contributes to an injustice system as opposed to the justice system, right? And so my contention is that in order to improve the justice system, every single individual attorney has to act virtuously in all of their endeavors, including legal representation of their clients. If lawyers did act with virtue as the main motivation, I think the entire system would improve dramatically. And so I draw some comparisons to, the goals of achieving justice. Here's a quote from Marcus, Meditation 7.63. No soul, he said, is willingly deprived of the truth. The same goes then for justice, moderation, kindness, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely essential to keep this constantly in mind, because then you'll be gentler with everyone. And so, what is justice? As Stoics, I think we understand justice to mean acting with, quote, piety, honesty, equity, and fair dealing, end quote. So judges and juries are required to be independent and objective when they're adjudicating an issue. Legal representatives, we have specific rules of etiquette, of practice, and of ethical obligations owed to both the courts and to the parties involved in a lawsuit. So, unfortunately, I think the qualities of piety, honesty, equity, and fair dealing are severely lacking in many legal matters. Not only, the ones that you read in the papers, but the ones that I've been involved with personally throughout my career. So increasingly, I think a lot of lawyers, at least when I was in law school, are ingrained with the understanding that you have to fight and do everything you can to win on behalf of your clients. And that means employing any and all strategies possible. I find that leads many lawyers into an ethical dilemma. Both, conflicts of interest. I've seen tampering of evidence where I know that the state is not giving me everything, proffering false testimony. There's overbilling and ethical practices by attorneys, taking bad cases, and, in essence, the win at all cost mentality, I think, does the exact opposite of serving justice as we understand it to be. So in a nutshell, there's a couple duties that attorneys always owe, all lawyers, any country. We owe the duty of confidentiality to a client. You cannot share what they tell you without their explicit authorization to do so. We owe the client the duty of zealous advocacy, meaning we have to fight our ass off to do the best job we can to achieve their ends. To that effect, if you're familiar, like the term fiduciary, right? Somebody that operates a trust or anything. A fiduciary agent is required to put the client's interests ahead of their own. There's clear ethical guidelines, and we need to, as an attorneys, fight vigorously to do so. And we have to avoid conflicts of interest. If at minimum, we have to get the informed consent from our clients and let them know that a conflict of interest does exist. So I contend that a lawyer's duties to their clients require that they take all actions to get the best outcome on behalf of their client, regardless of the lawyer's subjective impression of whether it's fair or just in the actual legal systems process. We're focused on getting to the goal. So I quote Marcus again, saying, "Let it make no difference to thee whether thou art cold or warm, if thou art doing thy duty, whether thou art drowsy or satisfied with sleep, whether ill-spoken or praised, and whether dying or doing something else. For it is one of the acts of life, this act which we die, it is sufficient then in this act to do it well, and what we have in hand." So you got to do your best on behalf of the clients, and I think a lot of lawyers fail to accurately balance the competing duties we owe, because as lawyers, we are part of the justice system, and we owe a duty to the courts and to the system itself. Those duties, so the ones to the clients are confidence, zealous advocacy, and avoiding conflicts. To the courts, it's the duty of candor and being honest. We are required to be honest. If we know the client is lying, you're not allowed to proffer bullshit to the court. That's an ethical violation of the attorney. And we owe a duty of competency to the court. So zealous, you got to fight hard for the client, but you have to know what you're talking about when you're dealing in a legal matter, because if you don't, you can make more problems for everybody. And so that is where you see the ethical rub, oftentimes exists. And so I quote Marcus again, because he's my favorite, saying, if it is not right, don't do it. And if it's not true, then don't say it. And that's pretty damn simple, but it's pretty damn difficult when you're an attorney and you're constantly put in these challenging situations, which is why I have a lot of empathy for my colleagues, because doing this mental math or these calculations is challenging. And I think if I didn't own my own business and have the luxury to say yes to you, no to you, I don't know, I don't know how you could sleep at night for a lot of my colleagues, if you care. If you do what I'm telling you most of them do, which is I'm fighting the best I can, that's my role in the system, and that's what I'm going to do, I think it's a lot easier of a job. But, for Stoics, we all recognize that it's incumbent on each of us to act for the common good. And so I've found myself oftentimes teaching younger lawyers, telling my staff, or even my clients, like, it's not my job to do the other side's job for them, right? I want to be fair, but at the same time, I can't tilt the hand completely. I'm not trying to necessarily take advantage of somebody's incompetence or ignorance, but at the same time, it's to great benefit to my client if they do. So that's a challenge that I find all the time. And so one thing that gives me solace when I'm doing that determination is the Chrysippus is quoted by Cicero in De Officiis as saying, quote, "He who is running a race ought to endeavor and strive to do the utmost of his ability to come off the victor. But it's utterly wrong for him to trip up his competitor or to push him aside. So in life, it is not unfair for one to seek for himself what may accrue to his benefit, but it is not right to take it from another." We all know that the only good, as we talked about at lunch, the only good is virtue. And so that's why it's imperative for everybody, including lawyers, to act with virtue. And we have to use our logic to accomplish that goal. And I argue to my colleagues that we need to evaluate every action that we take in our individual cases with our own subjective opinion, which is what they try to ingrain out of lawyers, that we're supposed to have this objective legal analysis. But I think that we are attorneys and counselors of the law, meaning I hold my client's hand, I tell him what's going on, and if I think that he's doing the wrong thing, I'm his fiduciary agent. I owe him my honest opinion and say it's bullshit and it's not fair, even if that's what you want. But again, it's very easy to get fired as an attorney from a client if you hold them accountable to a higher ethical standard than they might have. So that's why I think most lawyers that don't have their own practice don't have the ability to pick and choose their cases. Your boss tells you this is your case, you're assigned, your caseload, here's your 10 matters, and you just have to fight it. And I do try to relate and give each of them an out by saying, if it's assigned to you, then you might not have the ability whether to accept or reject, but that doesn't take away your subjective or your responsibility to employ your subjective perspective. And then I just like this other quote from Chrysippus that reminds me, quote, "The doctor sees all the weakness of mankind, the lawyer all the wickedness, and the theologian all the stupidity." That's actually Schopenhauer. That's not Chrysippus. Chrysippus said, "There could be no justice unless there were also injustice, and no courage unless there were cowardice, and no truth unless there were falsehood." So we're all preconditioned by our own personalities, and we can look at some of these topics in terms of the shared ethical grounds. Because I see a lot of similarities with what you guys are doing. There's no license that's required to teach other people. But you've all been called to this from your own moral, ethical compass, right? You've found enough solace and motivation and inspiration to better yourselves as people to share this knowledge with our mentees, since we're all faculty. And so I was thinking about it, like what are both lawyers and philosophers are called to maintain integrity under pressure. That's both in our personal lives and in our mentorship. Exercise sound judgment in uncertainty. Philosophers, like attorneys, can only make decisions based on the available evidence and potential outcomes. And I think we're all called to serve something greater than ourselves, truth, justice, equality, freedom, liberty, wherever your mind and your motivation lies, they're all noble. And so both, in essence, I see us as guardians of justice and wisdom, right? We're guardians. We're here to preserve the knowledge that we have taken down from the ages, which I think the college has very successfully done. And the way that we've set this up on the internet will serve to live on in perpetuity. Hopefully.
That's Mitch's vision.
So we preserve that knowledge, which I think we're doing good. Our teachers share that knowledge, which the college is the shepherding this whole process and how to teach us to teach others. And that we're all stewards here to embody our philosophy, which is why I'm here in Athens from California, and what I hope that we all get to take away from this incredible journey. It's an excursion of a lifetime, and I'm not joking. I am honored to be here and to share this.
So, in the Western legal tradition, we have this idea that everyone is due a fair defense. Everyone deserves to be defended in court, no matter what. But I've always wondered, when you have people who are criminals, or people who've been accused of, let me put it this way, people who are undoubtedly guilty of heinous crimes because they've perhaps been witnessed or they've been filmed or whatever, they still deserve a defense attorney. And the defense attorney's duty, sort of is also often interpreted to get them off, even though they may know that person is completely guilty. I mean, the most recent famous case, I guess, is O.J. Simpson, who I don't think very many people doubt that he committed the crime, but there was enough doubt created by the attorney to get him off, and he proved subsequently that he's a pretty disreputable guy, and he got involved in all kinds of other criminal activities afterwards. So I just wonder, what's the point at which you're talking about? Early on, you said you said something about taking on the right cases, making you have a critique about people
Right.
sort of taking junk cases.
I don't do criminal law, so for me, but my colleagues have told me the way that they interpret it is that they are representing the Constitution, and they're ensuring that whatever society's laws have been effectuated, that's what they're adhering, and they're forcing the society to give the right and the fair process to the guilty. Part of the reason I don't practice criminal law is because I don't know how they make that calculus. I personally couldn't do it, and I don't have to, so I'm in a fortunate situation.
The indefensible is really my question. How do you go about it?
One is they're not defending the individual; they're defending the Constitution and the process. The other that I can relate to, because I don't only represent innocent people, right? I do professionals that have made mistakes. I rationalize it as everybody deserves a second chance, right? Like I'm not in the business of keeping dangerous people on the streets, so to speak. But at the same time, I've never met a perfect person to date, and I know a lot of good people that have made dumb mistakes that deserve to keep their careers. So Does that kind of answer it? Yeah. Let's talk about the 4 Stoic virtues in legal ethics. And I just thought of a couple applications, and you guys can tell me if you think too. So the wisdom, for legal, it's like competence and sound judgment. For us as faculty, I was thinking intellectual honesty, right? In your teaching, like telling my students what I know and what I don't know. Oftentimes I feel like I over disclose in terms of I'm no sage. This is what the college is recommending. Justice, that could be the same, but I say fairness to the clients, the courts, the public. It's the same with us. Equity and mentoring and the grading of our different mentees, and debating probably. Courage, lawyers' advocacy despite adversity. I would say for philosophers, speaking uncomfortable truths. You were talking about that could be considered a vice earlier. I think it's a virtue. I think that as a philosopher, you're called to share uncomfortable truths with others, appropriate delivery.
Kevin, I was thinking you saying you were working in a law firm and you are assigned a case and you think for some reason that, you're not comfortable with it and so on, then that would be courage to speak up and say, we shouldn't be representing this guy.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is dishonest or whatever, we shouldn't be representing him. Well, you would be in danger probably of maybe being fired or, kind of thing. That would be an example to me of courage.
That's what's spooky about with logic and even teaching logic is that you can talk yourself into all that. So let's say you did do that and you might be showing courage by taking this difficult case to feed your family. That might be showing courage to put food on the table. There's all kinds of different ways to look at it.
Well, I guess, but I would say, to feed your family at somebody else's expense, is that ethical, or should you say, well, maybe I won't have as much money, we'll have to eat different food and only be able to have one car instead of 2. Because I wanted to ask you, what would you say to somebody, one of your...
But in reality, you're not going to tell your wife that. That's...
Well, I'll tell you, here's a story. I have a friend who's an attorney. We grew up together, actually, but he lives in Washington. Anyways, we went down to visit him, and while we were there, I noticed he was driving a really old beat-up car, even more beat up than mine. And his wife commented, she said, well, all my friends say, your husband's a lawyer. Why are you driving this crappy old car? And she said, oh, well, my husband is an honest lawyer.
I love it.
That's funny. It's true. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
What do you drive?
Which car? Depends on the day of the week. So let's talk about philosophical malpractice, because I'm wrapping up. What does unvirtuous teaching look like? I don't know. I said cynicism over clarity, partisanship over truth, maybe ambition over justice or honesty. Are we reinforcing or eroding virtue, I guess, is really the core question that we always have to ask ourselves when we're working with our students. Are we helping them strive towards being better people or not? And so practical applications for you guys, justice, I guess we'd ask ourselves, are we truly fair and impartial? Temperance, are we managing our ego and our emotional response to this particular student? Courage, are we willing to challenge the orthodoxy when we need? And wisdom, I guess, do you hold yourselves accountable?
Eric taught us years ago that there's 2 types of people in the world. There's the end justifies the means people, and there's the people where it's the aim, not the target, which is the Cicero, like the Stoics, because whatever. And in a world that's so heavy in the end justifies the means, how do you think, is there subtle ways you can introduce this to up-and-coming lawyers and other people to get more of that, maybe in the big picture, settle down the maybe dislike towards lawyers? Do you think there's any possibility toward that?
That's the goal. The only thing I can think of is grassroots, one person at a time. Just like with politics, I have a problem with politics too, even though I studied politics. I was poli-sci in college before I went to law school. And I worked at Congress in Washington, D.C. for 2 different congresswomen. And when I went back home to California, I realized politics is grassroots. You clean up your backyard, your street, your neighborhood, the city you live in. That's the only way that it actually works. Anybody going in with national aspirations, they're going to compromise their integrity.
So, given that law comes from the Latin lex, like law, and from this maybe somewhere we derive from logos. So you're mediating between different logoi in the end. So there's a conception of the world from your customers. There's your conception of the world. There's a conception of the world from the law system, and there's this Stoic logos. So where do you see the association? Yeah.
I guess a little bit of both, or all of them. I mean, I see it. I think I have a good perspective on it. I always go back. I tell Eric a lot. The reason I got into Stoicism is because as a Catholic, I felt like the dogma pushed me further and further away from God, and this has been the closest way that I get back to feeling a direct connection with my higher power. So I hope it's with the Stoic logos, but at the same time, I'm traveling with my family. I work my tail off to make as much money so that my wife doesn't have to. And I'm challenged every day. I don't know.
It's really interesting this because I part of teaching about organized crime in Latin America. I also cover the criminal justice system. I look into the justice system, how it works, penitentiary system, and my conclusion is that is the malfunctioning criminal justice system is what really destroys and makes the state completely illegitimate in countering violence and crime. I think that's the main crisis. You can militarize and build as many prisons as you want, but that's the main thing, and where no one seems to want to go.
Well, reform as opposed to incarceration.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we're just locking them up.
Exactly. Well, there are many horrible stories in Latin America about this, and some good stories, but mostly there is a problem with corruption and impunity. That's extreme. But my question was more, how is a lawyer's relationship with judges? Because that is also, I follow cases in, since you're taping, I'm not gonna mention which, but you see many times it's the one who put more money on the table is gonna push the judge towards left or right? Is there what kind of professional and informal relationship is there between lawyers and judges normally?
So I practice in the United States and only 2 states, so California and Nevada. So I'll only talk about my jurisdictions, okay. But from the vast majority, 95+% of all interactions I've had with a jurist, a judge, whether it be a pro tem, which is a lawyer that gets to sit on cases, or a guy that does it for a living, they are very good about avoiding even perceived conflicts of interest. But I can't speak for other countries, right?
But in each state in the US, it differs.
Oh, yeah, every state has its own laws. It's total different jurisdiction. So that's why out of the 50 states, you come to California, cannabis, it's a business. You walk into a shop, it's like a coffee shop on the road. You go to a different state, and they're still in the prison industrial complex, locking people up for a joint. It's bizarre.
Thank you for tuning in to the College of Stoic Philosophers podcast. Please visit thecollegeofstoicphilosophers.org for information on the college, e-journal, and course offerings. Till next time, pro cop time.